The internet has changed the way we market travel. Social media has changed the way we use the internet. And visual media has changed the way we use social media. In this webinar, we will learn about effective travel photography for social media. And it encompasses the 3 C's, composition, control, and connection, with some general photography tips. But before we continue this presentation, I just want to share something with you that a seminar I attended at Arabian Travel Market in Dubai in April last year. And Terry Kane, who has an executive position in travel for Facebook Inc. for the MENA region, the Middle East North African region, gave a presentation about what content works best on Instagram. And these were the 4 points he said. You are either inviting inspiration, making memories, tips for travel, or uncovering gems. So when you're thinking about what content, what photographic content you are putting on social media, consider this. Does your photography fill one or more of these criteria? Now, speaking from a personal perspective, this would apply to almost all social media. Our photography, the Travel Camel, it invites inspiration and uncovers gems. We don't find it useful for tips for travel. A photograph of my packing cells in my backpack just doesn't seem to be very exciting for people to look at. But you need to determine what is the content that works best for you, and your photography has to match that content. Before we continue, I must say a little bit about me. Quite a few know me as Conference Director for TBEX Europe since 2017. TBEX Europe is the largest online travel media event in Europe. I'm also a founder of TRLT, the Road Less Travel Twitter chat. We started that in November 2013, and we have chatted every week since. We haven't missed a week in more than 5 years. And a lot of the photos you will see here in this presentation are from the Road Less Travel. It's the area which the Travel Camel specializes in. I have 25 plus years of public speaking experience and more than 30 years of photography across more than 100 countries. Just a little thing about these photos. They're all taken with a Nikon, if you're in the US, North America, a Nikon, DSLR. All photos are a single image. I don't use HDR. I have no idea how to use it. So if you're looking for tips on that, I'm probably not going to be able to help you in this webinar. All photos are taken in a RAW format. This is very important because it gives you more post-processing options. For example, you notice that in quite a few photos, the color seems to be not right. It's too blue. Indoors, it's too orange. With just a click with the RAW format, you can adjust that color. You can't do that from JPEG. And all photos were taken by me. The equipment I use is a DSLR. I recommend using a DSLR or advanced mirrorless camera. It's not essential to use, but there's one part of this presentation that is very much designed for that sort of camera, and you'll see. Carry a tripod, filters and cleaning equipment. Nothing like a dirty lens to really spoil your photos. Good quality lens is vital. Cameras update every 1 to 2 years. Lenses update far less. So if you invest in a very good quality lens, it will stay with you for years. I'm carrying a lens now that I bought, which is a zoom lens, telephoto lens, which I've had since 2008, and it's still working fine. So a good lens will always stay with you. Never shoot in auto mode. We'll talk about this later. Shutter priority, aperture priority, manual, which is SAM only. And remember, photography is an art. You have to carry the correct equipment. It's just like an artist, a painter, going out into the field, wanting to paint a landscape, and they only have 2 colors and 1 brush. They're really not going to capture the landscape with all the greens and blues and yellows and different colors of the flowers if you don't have the correct equipment. So remember, photography is an art. An important point, and after this we go on to the points, is the rules for effective photography. They apply wherever you are presenting your photo. Doesn't matter. What changes is, what is the goal of your photo? Is your goal of making memories? Is it inviting inspiration? Is it tips for travel, or is it uncovering gems? Doesn't matter where your photos are displayed. It is the same basic rules. There are some differences though. People report that vertical photos work better on social media because people use apps on their phone, and the attention span of people on social media is very short. I don't know if it's short as a goldfish, but it's certainly very short. So you'll need to ensure that your photos are compelling and grab attention immediately and want people to read more. So let's get into the main presentation. The 3 C's in general photography tips. Let's start with composition. Composition is a very important part of photography, and there are 5 points I would like to talk about. The first one is the oft-heard rule of thirds. What is the rule of thirds? Well, I'll explain what that is. Here is a photo taken of a Maasai warrior overlooking the Masai Mara National Reserve right here in Kenya, where I'm joining you from. Look at this photo, look where the Maasai warrior is, look where the fireplace is. The rule of thirds is a point of a third horizontally and vertically, and where they join are considered to be the key points of interest in a photo. So this is where the rule of thirds are here. The fireplace just touches it on the left, the Maasai warrior's left arm skirts down 1/3. You don't have to always follow this rule, but it helps in most cases. This photo would be far less interest if I moved the Maasai warrior to in front of the fireplace and he was in the center. This would not be as interesting. He really adds something by filling that part of the photo, and the fireplace fills the third. Another example of this, this is the land the Maasai warrior is overlooking. This is during the day. This is during the Great Migration, where 2 million animals, yes, 2 million, come from Tanzania into Kenya in one of the greatest wildlife spectacles you will ever see. I took a few photos of this scene, and of particular interest is the zebra. The rear of the zebra is probably touching that third meeting point, horizontal and vertical. And I have other photos of the scene, and the zebra's in the center, but it didn't look good. It just visually wasn't as appealing as moving that into the rule of thirds. So the zebra in this photo ends up being in one of the thirds, and it was far more effective than putting him or her into the center. Leading lines and depth. There are some photographers get very excited about this, including myself. Leading lines are those lines that lead the viewer into the photo. Here's an example. For those, this is Tar Prom near Siem Reap in Cambodia. If you've seen the original movie Tomb Raider, this will look familiar to you. It was filmed there. Now, it's interesting. When I approached this temple, I approached from the left-hand side, and it's a nice-looking temple, and I saw many people come and just photograph from there, but it just wasn't enough. I had no leading lines. So I took a couple of steps to the right and knelt down. Suddenly, the tree root on the front of the photo leads you all the way to the back and up to the temple. The paving in the middle right, you can see with the broken bricks, that also leads you in. When you have a wide angle lens, such as I used here, even a step to the right, a step to the left, standing on something or kneeling makes a dramatic difference to your composition. And by just that few steps to the right and kneeling, suddenly I had a photo with leading lines. And as you can see, it draws you into the photo. Next, this photo screams leading lines. This is a train in the Isle of Man, a steam train, the fence, the train, the smoke, it all leads you to the distance. And this leading lines are really important. They can be these, they can be many other things as well. They can be roads, buildings, paths. Try to use leading lines in some of your photos. Again, these techniques, you don't have to use them all the time, but they are good to know to put into your photography. Less can be better. One thing I learned, so I've been photographing with an SLR since the 1980s. One thing I've noticed with my photography, the more I photographed, the less I put in each photo. If you put too much into a photo, the viewer says, what am I looking at? Where's the focus? What am I seeing? And a perfect example is this in Finnish Lapland. During winter, notice the tree is in the third on the left. A man with a snowmobile was taking his son for a ride around the frozen lake. Now, all I wanted in this scene was the snow, the white, the man and his son. That the focus is the man and his son. And it's easy to focus on him because he's wearing that orange high-vis jacket. I didn't want any foreground. I didn't want, trees or shrubs or rocks or fence posts. I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So simplicity in photography is often overlooked, and it's something you should consider. Next, framing with windows and other objects. This is a technique that is quite effective, especially with trying to make views or scenes, give them a bit of depth, make them look a bit more better make it look like you could walk into the photo. Here's an example. Here's an example. This is St. Vitus Cathedral and Prague Castle in the Czech Republic. I was trying to get a photo of this and I was walking along and I saw a whole bunch of people about 50 meters away from me. And I was heading in that direction. And as I was walking to them, and it was quite a warm day, I was staying in the shade under cover. And as I walked past this overhang, I looked up and thought, that's rather dramatic, framing with all those jagged edges. And I took the photo from there instead. And it was interesting that no one else took the photo from there in the time I was watching St. Vitus Cathedral. So it does pay when you're taking photos to look around for different angles, trying to get something different. So that's framing with a building. This is framing with another building. This is the old city of Sana'a in Yemen. Notice where I've stuck the building. It's on the right third. The tall building is on the right third, just after dawn, very nice soft light. If you have a look at this photo and you put that into the middle of the photo, this window frame, it just doesn't look as good. But moving it to that third and using that frame from that was the rooftop of the pension I was staying at, it really frames the old city of Sana'a beautifully. And finally, reflections on water and glass. Definitely don't underestimate these, especially glass or buildings. This is the city of Nur Sultan, previously known as Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. The sun was shining and I was just walking back from photographing something else and I looked and I thought the reflection looked fantastic and really added. You take the reflection away from that photo and have it a dark building, and that is a very dull photo. So the reflection highlights the left part and adds a bit of light and shade to this photo. So that is using buildings. This is North Korea. This is Pyongyang, and the river that runs through the center of the city with the Jusha Tower at the back. This is one photo where the rule of thirds does not work. If you try to do a rule of thirds here, it just wouldn't work. It's just not possible. So I made it more into the middle. I wanted to get it into the middle, but it just wasn't possible. I had it close. Again, it adds something. You take away, you put your hand up to the screen and cover over the reflection and have a look at the photo. It's okay. Now take your hand away and look at it and you think, that's nicer. So the reflection really adds to this photo of the Jusha Monument in North Korea. So all of those points I made there with composition, they apply even if you're using a small pocket digital camera or your phone. Now this one, this is where you need a better camera because control of light, control means control of light, becomes extremely difficult unless you have an advanced camera. These are the points we'll talk about, and I will mention the DSLR or advanced mirrorless camera. This is very important because what control of light allows you to do is it enables you to play more with the light in a photo. A phone camera does not let you do this well. A large sensor, both these cameras have larger sensors than a phone camera. A larger sensor means more light into your image, and more light into your image means you can play with the image more. You can play with the light. So this is why, of all the tips you see here, if you don't have a DSLR or advanced mirrorless, it is this control which is going to cause you some trouble. Everything else I talk about, the general photos tips, the connection and the composition, apply to everyone. But this one is for more advanced cameras. This is where it comes in. You use your exposure controls and filters to make the light even. The key is to make the light even. Digital photography has trouble picking up large contrast. By contrast, I mean a very bright area next to a very dark area. So if you can make the light even, everything just looks so much nicer. There are 4 ways to do it. First is the exposure control. If you have a camera near you, it will have the plus-minus symbol. The plus symbol overexposes, makes the image brighter. The minus symbol darkens the image. It makes it darker. Underexposes the image and makes it darker. The second is to use a graduated grey filter. There's a picture of one on the right. Half of the filter is grey and half of it is pale. And you can get filters of different density of grey. And the other one is a neutral density filter, which darkens the whole image. What this is useful for, have you seen those photos of those rivers? and the river doesn't look like water, it looks like ribbons. It looks very smooth. That's a neutral density filter. So it decreases the amount of light coming into the lens to enable a longer exposure to give the water that effect. You can use a full manual setting. I don't recommend this because travel photography, a lot of it is a point of time, especially street photography. You're waiting for the street to be empty or not to be as crowded to get that photo. Playing around with a full manual setting, it may sound really cool. I use my camera fully manually, but you're going to miss a lot of opportunities. I recommend the aperture or shutter priority. And if none of these apply to you, you just wait until dusk, until the light does become even. Let's look at the first, second, and fourth of these. This is Victoria Falls, taken from Zambia looking into Zimbabwe. Now, if you take a photo on auto exposure on this, you know what it will do? It will tell you, oh, hang on, the photos I take on auto are supposed to look like daylight, and it will brighten this photo. This is not what you want. So this was set on my usual, I normally set on aperture priority, and I underexposed the photo because I wanted to override what the camera was telling me. Oh, we need to brighten the photo. By telling the camera, I actually want this photo darker. And by pressing the underexposed, the minus, just as the sun kissed the horizon, it allowed me to do that. It only works when the sun is very weak, and I'll explain why shortly. But again, this worked because I deliberately underexposed the photo. The next one. Now, this is where underexposure will not work. This is the pyramids of Giza, of course, taken in Egypt. You need a graduated grey filter for something like this. The sun has so much strength that underexposing is going to make everything else on the landscape look utterly black or dark. It's going to take all the detail out of everything else. So in this case, I put the graduated filter at an angle. Started from the bottom left and went to midway up the right side of the picture. It's not possible to take this. The sun is too bright. Now, to give you an example, I have seen photo groups in places such as the Bagan temples in Myanmar, and I've seen photo groups in Padar Island, one of the most beautiful islands in the world in Indonesia. And these photo groups come en masse, the photo tours. And do you know what most of the people on the tour have, if not everyone? They all have graduated grey filters so they can get this effect, especially for sunrise. So here, you need, underexposure is not going to work here. It probably could because you only have a silhouette, but overall, the graduated grey is going to work better for you. This is where the graduated grey, underexposing, 100% will not work. It was a cloudy day, but the clouds were quite bright. So I wanted to bring out darkness, some texture, something a bit more brooding in the clouds. So here the graduated grey filter runs from just below the ceiling of the building on the left to the right. It's horizontal at this point. You can tell there's a filter on there. Have a look at the trees. They look a little bit too unnaturally dark. Now, if I had tried to underexpose this scene to compensate for the clouds, what would have happened? The street scene would have been too dark. So the only option here is to put the graduated filter on to give me the even light. To allow me to capture this image. And all I had to do then, once I had the graduated grey filter on in my position, I just had to wait for some people to walk into the frame. And that didn't take too long. Now, if you can't do both of them, you need to wait for dusk. You need to wait for the light to be even. This is the Doubletree by Hilton Hotel in Stone Town in Zanzibar, one of the greatest islands in the world if you have a chance to visit. And this is a photo I took during the day by way of example. Quite simply, this is a very poor photo. You have a lot of light on the left shining off the motorcycle, the moped. There's darkness in the photo. It just looks a mess. There's too much contrast in this photo. So how about you come back? Come back at dusk and let's see what the difference made. Now have a look at that. So now this is a much nicer photo. You can see the details. You can even see the receptionist on the front desk. You can even see that person looking at me, seeing what I'm doing. The light is a lot more even. If you were promoting your hotel or your property, are you going to choose this photo with the uneven light? No, or you're going to choose this photo. You're going to choose this photo. Now, a lot of this photography, you'll notice there's a lot of patience. You need to be patient to be a photographer. But if you're in the travel industry, you know you need to be patient. Travel and photography involve a lot of waiting. They go hand in hand. And therefore, if you really want to get the photo, then you will need to wait. In this case, I was staying at this hotel. So once dusk came, I just had to wander out again and set up the tripod and take another photo. But you can see what's happened here. With the even light, it allows a much nicer, visually appealing image for you to look at. Reflected light is better for portraits. Now, you're going to ask me, what is reflected light? And I'm glad you asked. So I'll tell you. I'll tell you first by talking about direct light. Direct light, especially direct light in the middle of the day, no one looks good in it. It brings out all the lines. It's very unflattering. It's like a fluorescent light looking at yourself in a bathroom with a white fluorescent light. No one looks good under it. No one looks good, almost no one looks good, with full sun on their face. Reflected light is a light source that bounces off another piece of ground or wall. It reflects, it bounces. So for example, if you put someone outside and take them with the sun shining on their face, that's direct light. Move them under the shadow, and the light that's bouncing off the wall you're near, or off the ground, that's reflecting. Reflected light is fantastic for portraits. And I'm going to show you 3 photos that I took from Afghanistan that show you how reflected light works in different instances. The first one is from the village of Ishkushum. The light source, this was a gentleman. First of all, I have to say about this photo, yes, see, people in Afghanistan do smile and do laugh. Don't believe everything you see in the media. And these are the sort of places I actually like going to, showing that the perception of places in the media is just not what the mass media will have you believe. And I have a lot of smiling people in Afghanistan photos just to prove that point. And in this photo, he is lit from the right. The street is on the right. He's in a carpet shop, and the right means that the left side of his face is dark. And this is my favorite way of lighting from one side of the face. It's not always possible, but it gives a nice texture, nice depth to his features. This is a photo lit from behind me and in front of the person. It was a doorway. The reason I couldn't have him in any other way, it was the room he was in was too narrow, so it had to be lit from behind. This was a very, very bright light. In fact, I had to get him to move back into this corridor that led outside because it was just too bright. So the light is behind. It gives a very even face. It flattens the face out a bit, doesn't it? It gives an even light across the face. And so the light was behind me and in front of him. Now the third one, so this is in the village of Sargaz. Now the third one was also in Afghanistan, and it's the village of Kala Ost. This is where the light is all around the subjects. This is a young lady and her child. Now in this case, the light is everywhere. It looks like a studio lighting. It's coming from the left, the right, below, and above. Very bright conditions, very bright ground. It was a bright dirt ground. The light was bouncing off everything, and this is why she has such an even light on her face. So these are the ways, when you have reflected light can come up in various methods. It can come from one side, which is my preferred, in front, or all around, depending on your choice of what you want and also what is available. And finally, control of light. Remember the blue hour. What is the blue hour? The blue hour is that time about 30 to 40 minutes after sunset. Yes, after sunset. The sky looks dark, but if you have a long exposure on your camera, the sky will look like this. This is the Jame Mosque in Esfahan in Iran. Again, this is about 30 minutes after sunset. The time the blue hour occurs varies greatly with where you are in the world. And you can see that even to the eye, it may have looked a lot darker than this. On the photo, with a few second exposure, it draws all that light in and brightens the image. One of the best examples I have is of Prague. Notice the bridge on the bottom. It's in the bottom third, virtually crosses across that bottom third perfectly. This works so well because I'm looking down, so I've got all the reflected light from the sky and into the water. So again, if you looked at this, if you were standing next to me when I took this photo in Prague, the sky would have looked dark, but not with a long exposure. It brings out the blue. So how do you get these photos, what is called the blue hour? You need a full manual setting. I normally set my first photo at 4 seconds at 6.3. It normally is too bright, but I can adjust from there. You can use a tripod. No one in the world can hold a camera that steady, even with stabilizing control, for 2-3 seconds. It's just not possible. You need a tripod. You also need a timer or remote control so there's no shake when you press the the remote. And also the blue hour is, I think, is a bit of a mistimed term. The blue hour rarely lasts an hour. It might in Scandinavia in summer, where there's long twilights, but I can tell you in most parts of the world, the blue hour is very short indeed, looking at no more than 10 to 20 minutes. So here's an example of how blue hour. I attended Arabian Travel Market in Dubai last month, and this is the view from my hotel room over downtown Dubai, the downtown area. The Dubai Opera House is there. If you move to the right, you see the Burj Khalifa. If you move further to the right, you see Dubai Mall, the tallest building in the world and the largest shopping mall. So this is the daylight photo. So let's have a look at what happens just before sunset. And you see what happens to the sky. The light in the sky as blue hour approaches. Okay, so this is end of the day. I come back, set up the tripod again, so it doesn't not a quite perfect match on the images, and the sun is setting. So this is, let's say this is a point zero, minute zero, just a sunset. Now what happens here, what is remarkable, I see so many people wanting to take photos, and they have really good cameras, and at sunset, as the sun drops below the horizon, they all go. And I'm thinking, hang on, you're missing the best part of the day. This next photo, 30 minutes after sunset. So you can see what's happened here. What has happened now is the sky is starting to change color. It's got that gray scent. This was a 1 second exposure taken at 7.1. f7.1. I couldn't have it more because the sky became too bright and the buildings became too bright. This was very much what you could see with your eye, though the sky was darker. So now you think this is the end of the photo. The sky's about to lose its light. Not quite. This next photo was taken 10 minutes after this one. 10 minutes. This is the difference. Now we're in blue hour. And this blue hour only lasted for 10 minutes. There was another photo, which I'm not sharing. I took 10 minutes after this, and the sky is black. So it was a very short window. So you can see what happens here. If you were standing next to me taking this photo, this sky would look black. But you have a long exposure, in this case 3 seconds, and it brings out that blue. And you can see the difference in the photo, how the light changes. Most people, when they take photos of places at sunset, or you're trying to take something to promote a destination or your travel business, they stop on the first two. But then you get the dusk and you get the bottom two. And that is, if you've got an advanced camera that can control light, you can pull out these bottom two photos. And finally, for the 3 C's, we have connection. This is the hardest of all the tips to do. Connection comes about through repeat visits and a lot of time. A lot of photographers, as I said, may be technically brilliant, but the connection is hard. It is really difficult to do. And to do this, I would recommend slow travel helps you connect with a place. You need to, the more time you're there, the more time you can build connections with people. You need to take time to observe before photographing. Whenever I arrive in a new place and I'm going to photograph, I just walk. I bring my camera with me without the intention of actually photographing, just observing how does it feel to me. If I do see something worth photographing, a moment I don't think I can replicate, of course I'll photograph. But the intention is to get to see what's around. Then by doing that, I know how it makes me feel. And then once I've got that, I then try to photograph how it makes me feel and to capture what I call a sense of place. And remember, when photographing people, get to know them before asking for a photo. I always, for portraits, when someone is the focus of a photo or closely to the focus of a photo, I always ask permission. It's not possible on a busy street scene. By the time you ask everyone in the street, they've all moved on, more people come in. It's failed. It's a failure of an approach. It just won't work. So what I do is I ask people and I get to know them. I won't go up within a minute and say, can I take a photo? I'll sit, I'll talk to them. This is where slow travel benefits. I'm going to show you some photos here of how I achieve connection in some photos. Notice that all these photos involve people, because in the end, people help us connect with a place. We connect with people and we feel connected to a place. The human story of social media, especially if you're promoting places from the road less traveled, it's the human story that puts a face, a personal face on a destination. And that fear, or is it safe? Is it dangerous? What are the people like? Starts to dissipate. And therefore, connect. If you want to show connection, you need to show people in some form. So this is near the village of Rangkul in the Pamir Mountains in Tajikistan. I had just come from Dubai and I had just finished a camel trip on a rather uncomfortable camel ride to where these people lived. I sat in the back. I stayed here for the night, actually. They lived in this one room. Everything was done in this one room. They ate, they slept, they talked. This was it. I had been there a couple of hours by this stage and I was just sitting there. They didn't speak my language and I didn't speak anything of theirs apart from thank you. So there was no communication. So I just sat and observed. I was an observer of the world. And then I saw them set this out and I looked at this room and I thought, this is really different from Dubai. Okay, I want to get this photo. So I raised my camera and I got them to see my camera. I raised it and I nodded. Now, if they had said no, I wouldn't have taken this photo. They nodded to me, yes, and I took this photo and I took the whole room because I wanted people to get that sense of place. This is what it's like living in the high mountains in Central Asia. It's a very basic accommodation. It's very warm inside. You can see the heater at the back there, but this is daily life. And I wanted to capture that sense of place, something that I could not capture anywhere else. Next, let's go to Iran. This is in Isfahan, and this gentleman's name, Mansour. He has been a silversmith for 35 years. Someone connected with me on Instagram, sent me a message. Instagram is not blocked in Iran, and said, oh, I hear you're coming to Isfahan. Now, I have no idea how they found out, but they said, I hear you're coming to Isfahan. Would you like to meet? And I'll show you around. So I met and he introduced me to his friend Mansour and we sat there. And I said, can I take a photo at any time? And Mansour said, yes. Okay. So I just sat there and I let these two talk amongst themselves and I just was a fly on the wall, just didn't say anything, just sat back there quietly. After about 20 odd minutes, Mansour decided to work with this massive silver bowl and he leant towards me. Now, I'd already had permission. He was comfortable with my presence. He was oblivious that I was there. And I just took this photo. And this only came about because I took time. As I said, travel is waiting, photography is waiting. The next photo. This is Hargeisa, the capital of Somaliland, which is a self-declared country next to Somalia, which almost no one in the world recognizes. Now, in Somaliland, it was an incredibly hospitable welcome, overwhelming hospitality. I can't go into how much hospitality I felt, but this was from the central market. I visited this central market a few times. And then after a couple of days, people started to recognize, oh, there's the Australian with a hat walking through the market. And then because of that, people recognized me. They got to know who I was. And therefore, approaching them for photos became a lot easier. Now, in fact, in Africa generally, and also in the Middle East, food is love. The offering of food, the sharing of food is a very big deal. It's a very big deal if you're a visitor. And in this case, he wasn't pouring the tea for me. He was pouring the tea for his co-workers. But he sat there, he gave me a smile when I approached. He'd seen me before I suspect. And I just sat down. And again, I held up the camera. He said yes. And I wanted to convey that sense, the importance of that sharing of food or drink, in this case, tea. I wanted to convey that. I wanted to convey the incredible hospitality I had there in this market and in Somaliland generally. And this was the photo that captures it better than any other. And this came about because I had repeated visits to the same place and people got to know who I was. And the fourth one, the final one, this is in Kathmandu. And this is a sadhu in Kathmandu. Now, how I took this photo is I spoke to this man 3 times before I took this photo. I was there to speak at a conference and I met him the first day and it was the middle of the day. The light was awful and there was no place to get reflected light. It was just really bad. So I said to him, I'm going to come back. And after my speaking duties had finished, I'd return. I saw him the first time to make sure he was there. Oh, you said you were going to take my photo. I said, yes, yes. Later, it's not quite the time. I wanted it to be right on sunset. So there was a soft light on his face. I walked past him again. I was photographing different parts of the temple area. And we spoke again. I said, I promise I will come back. And sure enough, 10 minutes before sunset, I approached him. I put him outside in front of somewhere he was sitting, the soft light on his face. Now, by this stage, he had seen me 4 times. He was comfortable. You can see he looks comfortable. He looks happy. We had a laugh and a joke together. You can see that cheekiness, that glint in his eye, that familiarity he had with me. That came through repeated visits. That is how I connected. Not by coming up to him on the first day, say, hey, can I take a photo? I went back and spoke to them again and again before taking this image. That is how I was able to establish this connection. Now, this brings me to the point of fan trips for photographers. When I was at Arabian Travel Market last month, I had quite a few people ask me, we'd love you to come to our country, our city, and photograph. And I said, okay, if you want the best out of me, this is how you do it. First of all, don't negate the benefits of hosting a photographer. And this is the first one. More time at less places. If you put me into 6 places in a day, I am not going to get good photos of any of them. I need to be in 3 places in a day with a lot of time to walk around, connect with people, sit and talk with them, not just shove a camera in their face and say, can I take a photo? I want time. The more time you have at less places means you get better photos. Second, I organize and moderate the social media sessions at Arabian Travel Market, and we had the Jordan Tourism Board on my panel this year. And they said that whenever they organize FAMs, they organize places to visit that allow the people on the FAM to tell a story. Likewise, if you are organizing a FAM for your photographers, set up something for them where they can tell a story. Don't just get a photo of another temple, another church, or another mosque. This is not going to work. You need something where they can tell a story, something to do with the culture, the history. And again, you're likely to have people involved in this at some stage. Get them to tell a story. And my pet peeve with FAMs is this one. Allow photographers to explore late afternoon and dusk. How many times do I get invites for FAMs and I see them come in and I see dinner, 6 o'clock, dinner, 6 o'clock. This is of no interest to me. I have been on FAMs before with other photographers, and you sit in there and we're sitting in a dinner and the light and the sun is just setting and there's a beautiful soft light everywhere, and they're looking longingly outside saying, I wish I was out there photographing. Don't organize dinners for photographers. If you're bringing me on a FAM, don't organize dinner for me. Give me some local cash and I'll get some street food. It's much better. Photographers by their nature are quite antisocial. They tend to avoid dinners. They get up early. They have to do it because that's the time to get the best photos. They wander off on their own because it's easier to talk to people to get photos when you're on your own than when you're with a group. They're not being rude or mean. It's just the way photographers need to operate. And so this is the key one. Don't force photographers into a restaurant at dusk. And to prove this, I want to show you this. If you've got a FAM and you only allow photographers out during the day, and then as sunset approaches, you put them in a restaurant, the only photo of these 4 will be the top left you will get. All your photos will be the same. You'll have no differentiation in your photography. You won't get the top right one and you won't get the bottom 2. Don't force photographers into restaurants at dusk. This is how you get the best out of your photographers. And finally, we're finished with the 3 C's. Let's have a look at some general photography tips. Just 3 tips to finish off this webinar. Let's look at the first one. A great view often doesn't make a great photo. Let's have a look at this. This is from the Moravian Silesian region in the Czech Republic. This is a town square. Again, notice at all the thirds where that statue is, where that monument is in the photo. Now, what I want you to do is put your hand over that monument and have a look at the town square. Yes, it's a pretty town square with lots of nice coloured and well-maintained buildings, but it's a really dull photo. Now take your hand away and have a look at the statue, and suddenly you have depth. When you want to photograph a view, some views this does not apply to. I've taken photos in Kyrgyzstan, for example, where it doesn't need it because the view was so amazing. But most times, you will need to get some sort of depth in your photo. It could be a rock, tree, table with chairs, or silhouettes. Get some depth, and it makes the photo a bit more interesting. Next, you've heard about why you need to stay out late. This is why you need to go out early for photographers. As I said, it's not a social thing to miss breakfast, but sometimes you need to photograph first before you eat breakfast. If you're coming down to Africa, going on a game drive on a safari, whether you have a camera or not, do your game drive before breakfast. There are far more animals to be seen. Likewise, in almost every case, there is far more to experience if you go out before breakfast and photograph. Here we are. This is Borobudur, sunrise in Indonesia. Notice the rule of thirds. with the statue on the left. Why don't I have Mount Merapi on the right? The reason is if I moved left, there was an ugly light tower. And there was no way I was getting the ugly light tower in this photo. I wanted a timeless quality about it, not a light tower. So I was stuck with this framing. I used a graduated filter across the top that went down to the level of just the middle point of the volcano there. And that allowed the even light to capture the mist in the trees and everything. So this again, before sunrise, just on sunrise, before breakfast. This next photo, this is in Odessa in Ukraine. This is the Opera House. Sun got up and I was out of bed, wandering the streets to take photos. This is just after sunrise. Look at the beautiful, beautiful light on the Opera House. Also notice the total absence of any life apart from the pigeon on the pavement on the side. There are no street, there are no cars, there are no people. You can focus your attention entirely on the Opera House. The focus of the building is the Opera House, not on a car parked by the side of the road or someone walking across that pedestrian crossing. It is the Opera House. Now, after breakfast came out again, the light was different. It wasn't as nice. There were cars parked on the left-hand side. There was traffic. There was no way I could have stood in the middle of the road on a busy city at that time of day to take a photo. The only reason I got this is I photographed first and ate breakfast later, got out early. And final point, only take a photo that you can take or make your photography different. And there are 3 photos I wish to share with you here. Many people have heard of the World Nomad Games in Kyrgyzstan, and it's a very popular, and I've never been, I'm sure it's a fantastic event. But this is also an event. This is in Murgab in Tajikistan. It's not very popular with foreigners. It's not promoted that way. There might be 24 foreigners at the most attending this event. This was a horse race. This was the battle for second. Yes, you can see lots of traditional nomad type games, but you don't see many photos from what is this games, which is called the At-Shabai Games in Murgab, At-Shabish Festival in Murgab in Tajikistan. You don't see many photos on the internet of this festival. So it's different. It's not the World Nomad Games, it's different. Not to denigrate the World Nomad Games, I'd love to go one day, but just saying, this is different. It's not from those games. Second one, this is in Ethiopia, St. Mary's Day, Aksum. St. Mary's Day in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, she's extremely highly revered. And I heard about this, decided to extend my stay, got up in the morning, it was 4:30 or something. I didn't wear my hat for a change, wore one of the white scarves across my head, so I could have blended in a bit and went along. They paraded through the city with the replica art of the covenant, which you can see in the top left third. You can see that standing there. And they sung prayers and they came back with the candles and then they conducted a service. And I looked around and we have leading lines. See the leading lines that lead your eyes around. This photo is everything. It was a soft light. There was no filter needed. It was a nice even light. And I looked around and I thought to myself, first of all, this captures what I felt. Walking through the streets with all these pilgrims, singing, and the reverence they had for this ceremony and seeing behind the replica art of the covenant was incredible. And this photo captures that moment. What was interesting though, is that I was the only foreigner there. I couldn't believe it. I looked around, I was the only one, and people kept looking at me and thinking, what are you doing here? Do you understand Amharic? Because I couldn't understand a word. Walked back to my hotel thinking, oh, obviously, there's probably not a lot of tourists in town. Came back to the hotel, it was full of tourists. And not only did they miss a great photo opportunity, they missed an amazing experience. So again, getting up early, doing something a little bit different. And the final one is from, it's a glittering finish to all the photos I'm showing here. It's the Shah Chirag Shrine in Shiraz in Iran. Now, normally it's very difficult to get photos inside of this. Very difficult. And the reason it is, you're not supposed to take advanced camera equipment into this. And you're not supposed to take any photos. So a lot of the photos you see of the interior of this shrine are taken from a mobile. It's obvious when you see their quality. So I explained to them, I visited first, then I went back later in the day and explained, you know, what an amazing, I've never seen so many mirrors in my life. This is a fantastic way to talk about your wonderful city, your wonderful shrine here. And they allowed me to take an SLR in under strict supervision. I had to stand in a certain place and I had a minute, not even a minute, 30 seconds in each place to photograph. And this is different because not many people see good quality photos of the interior of this shrine. Again, it's something different. And what I try to do in my photography is present something a little bit different from the norm. And these 3 photos are excellent examples of that. So during this webinar, you've learned about composition, control, connection to 3C, and general photography tips. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, the internet has changed the way we market travel. Social media has changed the way we use the internet, and visual media has changed the way we use social media. Whether you use social media for inviting inspiration, making memories, tips for travel, or uncovering gems, please use this webinar to help you market your travel business through social media using the art of photography. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shane. Some really, really actionable tips there. So we'll be taking questions now. So if you have a question, simply type it into the chat box below and we'll get back to you. Hopefully you're all quick typers because there haven't been any comments yet. Oh, we do have a comment. Okay. Ian is asking comments on portrait versus landscape mode.
Yes, the general feeling is that portrait mode, sorry, let's take that off the chat. Portrait mode does work better on social media. Portrait mode does work better on social media. It's because most people use their mobile phones, of course. I do have portraits. I have a lot of portraits I could have shared on this, but on a computer, which is most likely what most people watch this on, it doesn't work as well. Same with the website. Generally, I will share in speeches and presentations like this, I will share horizontal. On the website, I generally share horizontal. On social media, I'll share both, depending on the format. But I've been told that vertical is better on social media, but I think a lot of photos do actually look better in horizontal. So use a combination. Use a combination.
Excellent. So Lisa has just asked if you have any recommendations for photography classes for beginners to learn manual mode.
That's a very good question. I don't have any specific recommendations because I'm not quite sure of where you are, but I'll tell you a tip that I learned in 1989. I was in Kakadu in the Northern Territory in Australia. And I met a photographer called Courtney Milne. He's since sadly passed away, and he was photographing 100 sacred places in the world in 100 photos. And we sat down and we talked, and I showed him some of my fairly average photos. And I asked him at the end, what tips do you have for me to improve? And he said to me, just photograph. Just photograph. The more photos you take, the better you get. Having said that, manual mode is a bit tricky, but if you do want to get started with manual mode, set your camera on a tripod and take photos, and your data will be recorded on what the f-stop and the shutter was, and then you will see. When you take a photo, you will immediately see if something's too bright or too dark. You'll see if everything's in focus, if you've got the right depth of field. All of these things you will see.
Excellent, thanks. So Katie is asking if you could share your thoughts on editing photos versus relying on the natural light.
I'm a natural light man. I started before digital photography, so I have an obvious bias here. Someone growing up in the digital age is going to say, oh, no, you can post-process. My rule generally is this, is that the more time you spend in the field getting your photos right, the less time post-processing you need. So I would recommend that natural light is always going to be better, but it's not always possible. And in some photos where you cannot remove the natural light and the contrast is too bright. So for example, in that photo of the horse people running into the finish line, the original photo, their faces was darker. It was impossible to capture their face with all that bright dirt around. So I increased the shadow protection so you could see their face. So all I was doing was replicating what I saw with my eye. When I looked through the lens, I could see their face when I took the photo. But in the photo, they were washed, they were darkened because of the side. So I would recommend spending more time in the field, getting your photography right, practice with different settings. You've got the ability to look at it now, and then keep your post-processing more to a minimum.
Okay, so Ian is just asking if you have any tips for taking photos for Facebook 3D photos, and if you have any thoughts on the Facebook 3D photos.
I'm going to have to use the cricket term, I'll let that go through the keeper. I don't take 3D photos, so I'm sorry, I am unable to comment on that. Sorry, Ian. It's like HDR. It's not something I have experience with or expertise on. Sorry.
Okay, Sonam is asking, this is a very specific question. He's asking what type of camera is better, DSLR or EOS D5 or EOS D1300?
You're talking Canon to a Nikon man. My recommendation here would be, I don't use a full frame sensor. For some reason, I always use our full frame when I had a standard, and I don't have full frame now. And I kind of got used to not having a full frame. If you have a choice of two, your full frame is going to be better, okay? Because it allows greater light. It's a bigger sensor, so it allows more light, allows you more control. If they are both the same, check reviews, hold one in your hand. How does it feel? How does it feel? You know, every camera has a personality. Every camera, even amongst the same build, has a personality. In the old Nikon I had, it had a certain quirk when photographing anything with the sun slightly in front of me. And it was strange, and I knew how to compensate for that in the field. This current camera, it doesn't seem to have that issue, so it's a little bit easier to do. But I can't really recommend, I'm not a Canon man, I'm sorry, but full frame is your preference. Next, both are advanced cameras. They're going to have all the features you need. Or one bit of advice, you don't need to be sucked in by having too many megapixels. You don't have to. I think my camera's got 24. You can see 36 megapixels. Why do you need that? I spoke to someone who had a 36 megapixel camera, and I said, what was it like? He said, it's great for portraits, but that's it. And why? He said, because when you're out in the field photographing animals or nature or street scenes, it's too long. It takes too long time to get that photo processed before getting to the next one. You don't need 36 megabytes. So if you're in doubt and one's got a very large file size and the specs are basically the same, I'd go for the slightly smaller one. Anything over 12 megabytes is going to be plenty for most people.
Right, that's an excellent point. So Lisa is just asking, is it okay to use mobile phone pictures for Instagram stories?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Absolutely, not a problem at all. The reason, as I said, all of this applies to you. Your composition, your connection, the 3 tips at the end. The only one you're going to have trouble with is control of light. But of course it's okay. The difference is if you take a photo and want to sell it afterwards and you've taken it from your phone, when someone who purchases it blows it up to full size, the limitation of a small lens, which is in your phone, becomes apparent. But if you're just doing it for stories, I have no problems with people using their phones at all. It's just that the control of light will be an issue, but the rest of everything else I discussed here will apply to you. Absolutely no problems.
Absolutely. I mean, the best camera is the one you've got with you, right?
Yep, exactly.
So I absolutely love this question from me. He's asking, I heard that animals, i.e. dogs, have more engagement on social media. Tips? Do you have any tips for taking the best photos of animals?
Isn't that interesting? On our Instagram, we think animals are less, but then again, we don't post animals. We don't have a pattern of posting animals. Animals, okay, remember the rule. Photography is waiting and photography is waiting. Animals are slow. If you try to take photos, and I started taking animal photos in Australia, when I'd sit there and wait for a lizard to come out. The longer you were still for, the more the animals will come out because they don't perceive you as a threat. So if you just race in and say, I need to get a photo of an animal, as soon as you approach, they all go. Right? So then what you have to do is you have to stay in one spot and don't move. Even scratching your head, just don't move. Sit there with your camera ready and the animal will eventually come back to you. It's a good idea to be a bit low to the ground, especially for smaller animals. I wouldn't recommend that photographing an elephant that way, by the way, in Kenya. But you want to be low to the ground for a lot of the animals you want to photograph. You need a nice zoom lens, a nice telephoto lens or a zoom lens, which is a long reach that you can get closer and so you don't have to crop it as much afterwards. But the key to photograph, and also when you photograph animals, do shutter priority. So do your shutter, set it at 1,000th or 1,500th of a second, and then move your aperture. If it's showing if you're going to underexpose, increase your ISO, say from 200 to 400 to 800 to 1,000, whatever's needed. But use your shutter priority first and be patient. Take your time.
Okay. I think Paul is asking, do you suggest clicking photos with an iPhone? I think that just means taking photos with an iPhone.
It's the same answer. Yes, you can take them. Absolutely no problems. If you want to sell them, unless it's some, some scoop of, some scandal you've happened to take with your phone at a party or something, where someone definitely wants to buy it because of media value, people won't be interested in buying it if it doesn't have the quality. But for most of your photo needs, it's going to be enough. As I said, applies to everything except for control. Control is going to be the one issue where the control of light will be the one issue. But apart from that, everything else you're fine with an iPhone, Android phone, whatever you choose. It's fine for most of your photo needs apart from control.
Okay, and Ian is asking, do you leave the GPS data in your photos when you publish them? And if you have any tips for what to put in the metadata?
Gee, Ian's got a lot of questions, which is good to hear. I don't use GPS. I turn the function off, and I turn the function off because it is a battery killer. It kills batteries. It drains batteries very quickly. Maybe one day I will, but I know in the early GPS devices that came out on phones, they weren't very accurate. Some people complain they weren't very accurate. I do it because some of the places I go to, even with a backup battery, I may not be able to charge my camera for days, camera batteries, and I need to save as much battery life as possible, and GPS will suck it out. So I actually don't use that at all. So yeah, I'm a bit old-fashioned that way. I did start in the 80s photographing, so do excuse me.
I guess that comes down to having to wait a long time to take photos sometimes. So you certainly need to keep that battery life. Okay, so Paul is asking for a Nikon DSLR. Which one do you suggest for an amateur photographer?
Okay, now's a question I can answer. You've got a few series, the 1000 series. Okay, so the 1000 series, so you have the Nikon D3000, D5. 3000 I don't recommend. It won't grow with you as you grow. For the best entry level one is one of the more advanced D5000 series. And then I have a 7100. They would be, I love the 7100. The minus is the buffering rate. If you're trying to take wildlife, it only allows you to take 6 photos at a time before it starts thinking, before it allows you to take it again. The D7200 solves that problem. So if you had the extra money, I'd go for the D7200. If that's too much for you, go for one of the higher end D5000 series. So not 5000 or 5100, the others, the higher end, 3, 4, I don't know how high they go, but they would be my recommendations.
Fantastic. Okay, that looks, nope, hang on, I'm getting more. Okay, what lens size do you use?
Now that is an excellent question. I have a standard lens. It's a Nikon 16 to 85. So I travel quite lightly. I do not have a lot of camera equipment I travel with. I have a 16-85 lens. The reason I chose it is if you see long lenses and they'll say 18 to 200, don't get them. And I'll tell you why. The reason is that it's like trying to please all the people all the time. You're just not going to please everyone. You're only going to please everyone to a moderate amount. So I would recommend that you get a lens that's a 16 to 85 or something to 80, and then get another lens for your longer zooms. So I have a Nikon. The reason I like it is those lenses that have a very big focal range, they can be very soft in sharpness at one end or the other. They can have a lot of distortion as well. So get a mid-length zoom. I have my 80 to 400, which I've carried, as I said, I purchased in 2008, going strong. And that does very well. And I take that only when I think I need it. So if I'm going to a sporting event or to wildlife, I won't just take it to, for example, general travel, because it's just too heavy. I travel lighter, I say. So the other lenses, I say, one lens rarely does all. One lens rarely does all. So instead of a 18 to 200, you're better with, say, an 18 to 85. and a 70 to 210. That is a better combination quality of lens than getting an 18 to 200. Yes.
Okay, and Paul is asking, what lens do you use for close-up photography?
Now, this is not an area I'm good at. I've got to say, this is an area, you notice, if you look on any of my feeds on social media, I don't photograph food. I don't do a lot of close-ups. You can get specialized close-up lens. If I was really serious about this macro close-up photography, I would get a lens that's for that purpose. Because of the large file sizes, if you've got, I mean, my camera wants 20 odd megapixels. It's fine for me. So there's a chameleon in the garden here in Kenya, beautiful color. So all I did was stand back, zoom in on it to kind of get it, the depth of field correct I wanted. And because it's such a large file size, I just cropped the photo afterwards. But that's not a good answer. The best way is to get proper lenses that do this macro photography. Generally, your single focus, not your zoom lenses, do it. So for example, your 50mm standard, and that they tend to do it better. But it's not something I own at the present. I used to, but not now.
Okay, thank you so much, Shane. I think that's all of the questions that we've got tonight, or today, for wherever everybody else is in the world. Tonight for me. So we're getting a lot of thank yous through those. So I think everyone's enjoyed this webinar as much as I have.
I'm just looking at them now. Yeah, we've got a lot of people. This is lovely.
Fantastic. So I've got to thank you as well. Thank you so much, Shane, for joining us today. And thank you everybody else for joining us as well. And of course, don't forget to sign up to our other upcoming webinars as well. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to accurately track your marketing campaigns with my colleague, Ben, who'll be able to answer any questions you have about analytics. So he's absolutely brilliant. So I hope you can all join us then. And of course, if you have any other questions or feedback for Shane or myself, just let us know by writing to kirsty@travelmassive.com, or of course, reply to the email that got you here. So thanks again, everybody. Bye.